You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome on into McGuire Mondays here on Toronto Sports Rush. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, joined by Pierre McGuire as always. And the Toronto Maple Leafs drop Game 4, 2-0 in Florida. They get shut out in Sunrise, and now it is a best-of-3 series. And Pierre, a game on Sunday night was perhaps a little bit of maybe the Panthers playing the way we expected them to play, but the Leafs also not really playing at all. But there's also a lot of things you could say. What's your biggest takeaway from Game 4?
The aggressive penalty killing of Toronto, Julie, and how effective it was for most of the night. If it's not for a beautiful play by Matthew Tkachuk over cross-ice seam to Carter Verhaeghe, we're probably still playing. Honestly, the game's probably still going on. It was that tight. Bobrovsky was outstanding for Florida in goal. I can't say enough about what Toronto's players went through and what they did. And obviously, Joseph Woll was fantastic in goal for Toronto. They had to have him be great, especially in the first period with all those penalties. But my takeaway is this is a series that's not for the faint of heart. This is a nasty, old-school series. And I am a huge fan of both coaches. But Paul Maurice has played this thing like a fiddle. He has done an unbelievable job massaging the message in the media. He really has.
He has. Okay, so let's dive into that a bit more. This is not for the faint of heart. There were tons of penalties in this game, but lots of missed calls and a lot of sort of extra stuff after the whistle, especially at the end of the game. But overall, we're kind of seeing some of the guys I don't know. We're seeing the Florida Panthers be the Florida Panthers that we know off the ice, like the Sam Bennett's, different guys getting in the media saying different things. What do you make of, I guess, sort of the emotion of this series in terms of like missed calls or how the games are being played? Because it just feels as though it's definitely not going in the Leafs' favor, but it just feels like it's going to lead to something very bad if it keeps going this way.
Well, first of all, I think the officials will take charge of Game 5, number one. They'll set a message early on, and I'm sure both coaches will prepare their teams accordingly. After the whistle, scrums, hits from behind, cross-checks to the head. I'm sure the series manager is going to go to both coaches and say, look, I'm just telling you right now, your guys do that, they're going to the box. We'll have a steady stream of guys going to the box. So I think eventually the referees will get to that and control it. I think it's been a problem throughout the entire playoffs. It's not just this series. It's most of the series. I go back to the Montreal-Washington series, the Tom Wilson hit on Alexander Carrier, the Alexander Ovechkin hit on Jake Evans, the Alexander Alexiev cross-check to the face right on Brendan Gallagher, and he's a puck carrier on the play. I mean, these are all things that were not called. They were missed, and I would say that they're going to have to reel it in because it's not that it's dangerous, but it's not good. It's not good for the game. It's not good for the players, and it's going to eventually lead to a problem, like you said. In terms of this series, Toronto's prepared 82 games to be battle-hardened and ready, and I think they are. And the Florida Panthers are not going to change their MO. This is who they are ever since Paul went there, and that's a good thing. They have an identity. And Paul's done a great job. Paul Maurice said has done a great job massaging the message. He's done a great job.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I after seeing Evan Rodriguez go down in Game 4, we know that he was called for embellishment, which was, I thought, debatable in Game 3, but especially in Game 4, and OEL gets a penalty for that. Of course, it went from 5 to 2. But if you see Mitch Marner get the elbow from Kulikov, in a way, do you say to Marner, like, lie down, like, stay down? Because the way this game is being called, like, all these extra little things are being taken into consideration.
Yeah. I would personally never say that to one of my players. I think you lose credibility when you've preached something the entire year. We're going to be a tough team. We're going to be a hard team to play against. We're going to play with a certain identity. And then all of a sudden you tell your guys, oh, by the way, don't be afraid to dive. I think that would convolute the message. I don't think Mitchell will ever dive. That being said, everybody wants to talk about the play at the end of the game with Max Domi and Barkov. Mm-hmm. That Kulikov hit was the equal, if not worse, because it's a flying elbow to the head of a player that doesn't have the puck. I mean, it's not a good play.
No, I've been circulating that one around the different group chats that I've been on, as everyone has been not necessarily very happy with the officiating. We know that the Toronto Maple Leafs had 4 penalties in the first period alone. Some of them, just silly things here or there that they didn't need to do. They didn't, or, you could go either way. It just felt like they didn't necessarily need to be down a man for so much of the time, in terms of the fact that, like, they were on the penalty kill for almost like Scott Lawton had more minutes played in the first period than Auston Matthews. How much of a disadvantage did that really even just put over this entire game?
A lot, because it's a rhythm game. We talked about that off the start. Toronto's a rhythm team. Their top players, whether it's Auston Matthews, Matthew Nyes, Mitchell Marner, John Tavares, Willie Nylander, Max Pacioretty, those are rhythm players. Lawton's not a rhythm player. Max Domi's not a rhythm player. Those are guys that are hardcore guys, physical guys. Pontus Holmberg's not a rhythm player. Your top guys that have to have a lot of puck touches, those are rhythm players. They need to be engaged in the game. But you're right. It was a big problem in the first period. It kind of set them back. I know Toronto had 12 shots after 2 periods. I think they were being friendly. I think it was more like 9 shots, but it's okay. We'll say 12. That's still not good enough. And if you're only at 23 for the game against Bobrovsky, which is what the actual count was, that's not good enough. That shot total's got to be 27 or higher, 28 or higher, and it's got to almost be pushing over 30. It's a race to 3 in this series every game. And if you don't get to 3 first, you're probably not going to win. 3 goals, obviously, and you usually score 1 in every 10 shots. That's just the average. So right. I'm not, Julie, I've talked to you about this before a lot of times. You're never in trouble till you lose on home ice. So the Leafs are still good. Just like I felt when they went down to Florida, that Florida was still good. I said that to you. I said, they're not in trouble yet. So nobody's in trouble yet. Game 5 is a huge one, though. It's a huge one for Toronto. Toronto can't lose Game 5. It's really imperative they win Game 5.
It's almost as if in that Game 4, if they could have just had Joseph Woll, or in Game 3, Joseph Woll's performance from Game 4 in Game 3, that would have been a very nice recipe for them being able to have gotten a win in Florida. But when you look at it, it's like when they were only down 1-0 for a very large stretch of this game until Bennett scored the second goal. And it felt, though, like they weren't ever going to score. Like, even though they were down just 1 goal, I felt they were having such a hard time getting inside. They had, as you mentioned, the shots, but even any kind of grade A chances. How has Florida just really been able to box out the front of the net?
There's a great sequence late in the game of Aaron Ekblad boxing out on Max Pacioretty. It's a spectacular job of boxing out. Sylvain Lefebvre coaches their defense. I think Sylvain, former Maple Leaf and Montreal Canadiens, has done a phenomenal job with that defense. Forsling's really improved. Ekblad is obviously a tower of power. Mikkel has become a tower of strength. Seth Jones was a really good addition for them. Kulikov's a nasty piece of business. You've already talked about him. Nate Schmidt's got mobility. Are they as good as they were a year ago? I don't think they are. I don't think they're as good because Brandon Montour's not there and Oliver Ekman-Larsson's not there. But they're pretty darn good. It's a pretty good facsimile of what they had. Their neutral zone play is fantastic. It all starts in the neutral zone. Their neutral zone play is great. Their in-zone coverage is good, and they got big behemoths on the back end that just don't let you have easy access to the front of the net. So they make it an easier game for Bobrovsky to play. It's not a convoluted formula, but it's a formula that works. It really does work.
Yeah, they stifled them so well in Game 4. So then we got to point to the obvious guys who have been a bit Casper right now. Ghosts, Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner. Seemingly, they're both dealing with something. Marner, okay, we'll put aside and not talk about the fact that he had some great defensive plays, and they were on the power play too as well. The fact that Florida had so many opportunities shorthanded and Woll had some great saves, thank God. But what's going on with Matthews and Marner, but especially Matthews? Like, do these guys need to have an eye doctor come over there? They can't seem to find the net.
No. I don't think so. It's just become a very muddy racetrack. And these guys are thoroughbreds that are used to running on clean tracks that don't have a lot of mud on it. So Florida makes it a muddy game. You're going to have to figure it out. This is where Matthew Knives, who's, even though he's a thoroughbred, has to be more like a plow horse. He's got to create some room on the cycle, on the forecheck. This is part of the issue too. And I'm not blaming anybody. Again, I credit Paul Maurice and his coaching staff. I've never seen obstruct more on the back check than Florida does and get away with it. Their obstruction is unbelievable. And it's all coached. That's fine. That's good. You can see it. So it's hard for Toronto to get good first-man pressure. Go watch the tape and you'll see what I'm talking about. They do an amazing job of boxing out your first forechecker so you can't get good first-man pressure. Then you can't establish a forecheck. Then you don't create second and third chance opportunities. And then you're in transition going the other way because they've already moved the puck out of the zone. So I give them full marks. But if I'm Toronto, I'm making a tape of all the obstruction. And I'm showing, saying, hey, look, you know what? You want to call that on Domi or you don't want to call that on Kulikov? You better start calling this. And that's just part of the gamesmanship that goes on. But again, this is not anything against Florida. It's to their credit. They have figured out a way to obstruct extremely well so you cannot get good first-man forecheck pressure.
Right. It just felt a lot like the Florida team we saw at the end of the regular season, one that we expected for so much of this playoff. So then, let's give some flowers to Joseph Woll. He kept them in this one. He had 35 saves, and he deserves a lot of credit. What did you see from him that was different from Game 3?
He was challenging. He was at the top of the crease. He was really making himself look big in goal. I thought he was active when he had to be anchored. I thought he was, anchored and solid and looking big. His glove hand worked really well. I thought his rebound control was very good. He had great reaction time saves where usually he maybe doesn't react like that. So that tells me he was reading the play, digesting the play really well. And I think the biggest thing was he wanted to prove a lot of people wrong, Julie. He did not, as you correctly said, he did not have a very good Game 3. And if he had a better Game 3, there's a good chance Toronto's up 3-1 going back for Game 5, but he did not. And so now they're 2-2, and it's a long series, as you said. It's a best of 3 now.
Right. Okay. So best of 3. We look ahead to Game 5. If you look at the fact that the power play was a 0 last night. And Blake Wheeler here on air mentioned it. I'm in Canada right now. I'm in Toronto. So there's a lot of there's a lot of stress right now. Not stress as in if they lost Game 5 type of stress, but the stress is up. But Blake Wheeler suggested maybe switching up the power play, maybe getting a defenseman on there, which we have seen what it's like with Morgan Riley, and that's who they likely would go with, even though OEL probably would be a better opportunity. But do you think that they should adjust the man advantage?
What I would look at is the first power play they ran yesterday. It had a lot more movement in it. It was harder for Florida to establish pressure points in the offensive zone of Toronto, the defensive zone for Florida. They're clearly overplaying up high because they're trying to force Toronto into turnovers. And those guys are pretty courageous, talking about Toronto's guys, so they're not afraid to take chances. If it's just a regular defenseman back there, he's moving the puck quick. He's not going to try to toe drag a guy at the offensive blue line. So I would try to simplify things. Mitchell tried a couple times on one-timers. They got blocked. That's one thing Florida does amazingly well. They
difficult.
Take away shooting lanes. They really do a good job. And I'm not taking anything away, again, from Paul Maurice, but Sylvain Lefebvre played for the late, great Pat Burns and Jacques Laperriere, and that was a staple for both those guys. I coached against them when Laperriere was in Montreal and when he was in New Jersey. And I'm telling you, his guys were good. And Sylvain would have learned a lot of that from Lappy. He would have learned a lot of it from Pat. And I think they've carried that over down to Florida. They do a really good job of that. So you're going to have to find a way in the power play to move it quicker, get it to the inside part of the ice, and get pucks in that. If you get an open look, you got to take it. You got to take it. And that's where Nyes in particular has to do a good job in front of the net on Bobrovsky. He can't get pushed out. He's got to hang in there and really be a big body presence.
Right. Nyes is perfect for this. He's the guy that's in front of the net. I mean, as we said, he's a fire hydrant. He's just a brick wall right there, and that's what the Leafs need. So then if we were to just look specifically at Auston Matthews, who's getting a lot of heat, because this is the time of the year where these are the guys that need to step up and have been always under the spotlight every other year. We know that he's dealing with something and has been for the entire year after he had gone to Germany earlier this year, dealing with some kind of issue. But how does he rectify that? Like, why is he missing the net so much is what I'm curious about.
It's a great point. There was one opportunity where he had a one-timer and he missed a net by a significant amount last night. I don't know why, but I would just say this. And I know people in Toronto don't want to hear this. He's done a lot of good stuff too, trying to influence games. His face-off play last night was much better than it was in Game 3. There were key face-offs that he did not win, especially on power play situations. That's got to be better. But defensively, he's done some really good things for the team. Now, I know it's not scoring, so he's going to have to figure out the scoring part. But to me, the biggest thing is don't stand still when you get the puck. I think a lot of times now he's thinking rather than reacting. He's got to react more than think. You can't be too cute a game. Now, Florida doesn't allow you to play a cute game. That's why Boston lost to them 2 years ago, and that's why Boston lost to them last year. They overthought the game. You can't overthink it with them. As much as they want to muddy the track, you got to muddy the track right back against them. Right. This reminds me so much of New Jersey back in the 90s. It really does. The obstruction on the forechecks, the shot blocking, the fronting, the crease clearing, the goaltending, Brodeur. I know Bobrovsky's not as good record-wise, but there's a lot of similarities between Bobrovsky and Brodeur. This reminds me so much of Jersey in the 1990s. It's scary. It really is.
Yeah, and to your point about reminding of you of teams of last year, it just made me think of the Rangers when they played them and how cute the Rangers were on the power play whenever they would get an opportunity because they just, as you said, Florida pushes them to the perimeter. They don't get any shots through if they even take one. Like, they're too cute is what I said that when I was watching with my family. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're just getting one shot on goal in this entire power play so many different times. Do you make any lineup changes for Game 5 if you're Toronto?
Probably not. I'm sure there's probably people calling for Ryan Reeves to go in. It depends on the health of the players. The one thing I'll say that Paul Maurice has done in this series that I think has helped him, he changed his entire fourth line. So he took Mackie Samoskevich, Nico Sturm, and Boquist off, and he put in AJ Greer, and he put in Tomas Nosek, and he put in Jonah Gadjevich. And that's made a massive difference for them. That's more like the identity of the Florida Panthers, and those guys have made a huge difference on the forecheck. Offensively, in game number 3, they were really good. And they plant a seed of doubt in the defensemen of the Toronto Maple Leafs in terms of, oh my gosh, here these guys come again. They're going to plaster me against the wall. And if you look at how Paul Maurice used Tomas Nosek last night in the third period, it was almost every other shift in a checking situation, and he was really good at it. So Florida's had that ability to make those adjustments. I don't know if Toronto's got enough depth to do that right now. If everybody's healthy, I'd probably go with the same lineup. I didn't think they played a bad game yesterday. I just wish the power play would have been better for them.
Yeah, when you do look at some of the stats and some of the articles I've been reading in the newspaper, like the old school newspaper, I love when I come home because my family still gets them, and just reading all the articles, we have to think like Florida had outshot the Leafs 29-12 through 2 periods, and they had been disadvantaged on 4 penalty kills in the first period. Like, the fact that they were only down 1 goal is really remarkable, to be honest. It felt like it could have been 7-2 if you were just looking at kind of the way things were going, but it wasn't. It did feel like a game that took a lot of energy out of this series, as we know, because the Leafs were up 2-0 now. It is a best of 3. They've got an extra day off now. So in what way do you think that could help them, and how could they best use that if you were Craig Berube?
First of all, power play adjustments would be number one. Face-off protocols on shorthand situations and power play. When you win them shorthanded, the puck's got to be out. There were too many times last night where the puck didn't come out. That led to a lot of extra time, penalty killing in their own zone. Toronto can't afford that. I like, though, the fact that Toronto was more aggressive on the penalty kill last night. that's a positive adjustment from game 3 to game 4, which is really good. So I'd be spending time on the power play. Mark Savard, Craig Berube, they're going to have to come up with a better plan, number one. Number two, I'd have face-off protocols for power play face-offs in particular. You can't lose them clean. It's too easy to clear, and that's when Florida's at their best. They pressure you up ice, and they cause problems on your entries. So that's got to be something they got to be better at. And then the third thing is I just keep stressing that we've got to find a way to create more second and third chance opportunities. We got to get the shot total upwards close to 30, not closer to 20. We need it closer to 30. And if you can do that, I think you have a better opportunity to win.
How would you deal with the, sort of like between the whistle type of action that goes on, or elbows being thrown, or all that extra stuff if you are the Leafs, and how things ended where there was a lot going on at the end of the game? Let's just focus on that in particular. Max Domi, Barkov, all the guys kind of get into a little bit of a skirmish. We see the close-up of Matthew Tkachuk just smiling down the bench, kind of like a, we're coming to get you type
Telling
of vibe.
Nylander he's going to take care of him next. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How would you approach that if you were coaching this Leafs team?
I would just grab certain guys and say, look, your job is to play. Don't worry about that other stuff. We'll take care of that. I played that. If I were Craig Berube, I say, I played that role. I know what it takes. You're not that guy. Just let me take care of that other stuff. You go play. And we don't have to change much. We need you to score. We need you to make plays. We need you to take advantage of power plays. I'd stay right out of it. Play whistle to whistle, chest to chest, nose to nose. Once the whistle blows, get back to the bench or get back to the face-off. The referee, I really am more convinced than ever, based on what happened at the end, to your point, Julie, the referees will take charge of Game 5. And you're not going to see borderline officials in Game 5. You're going to get a top crew in there, probably led by Wes McCauley, I would imagine. I wouldn't say much, but I just tell guys, you got to do what your job is. If you're a dancer, you dance. If you're, a singer, you sing. If you're a member of the band, you're a member of the band. Don't try to be the star. Everybody's got a different role to play. But I hope Craig Berube, and I haven't read his press accounts today, but I hope he was proud of what his guys did, because they went into the belly of the beast last night. That was a tough game, and I thought they handled themselves pretty darn well. I really did. I thought they handled themselves pretty darn well.
I think a lot of his quotes, as I was just telling my mom, listening to another podcast that had some of what he was saying on, if you ask, the human psychology is to neutralize like any statement, basically. So if you're like, well, what did you think of Auston Matthews and him not being able to score any goals, or him having a hard time finding the net? It would be like, Berube will try now to make it a positive, because you've just kind of put a negative on it. It's a very interesting, oh, you were having a hard time in the first period. It's like, no, well, we did. You'll always see it. And Berube does it perfectly to a T, from what I learned from a wonderful teacher I had at ESPN, John Sawatsky, who is fantastic at teaching you how to ask questions, because it's very interesting, the human psychology behind answering them. Now, I'll ask you one final question. When you're trying to get some of your horses going, your thoroughbreds going, is there a change that you could make in who they're playing with, maybe in terms of your line combinations that you think, and maybe there isn't one, but that you think could spark something?
Absolutely. I would think about putting Nylander with Matthews and Nyes. I think about putting Marner with Tavares and McMahon, or maybe moving Domi up on the left side and moving Pontus Holmberg to the middle, because there's roster flexibility in Toronto that a lot of teams don't have either. But I would really think about putting Nylander with Matthews. I think that could stimulate Auston. I think that would get Willie going. Look, Willie has a breakaway last night. It was a great play by McCabe to stretch it out for him. Just couldn't capitalize. Matthew Nyes had a breakaway when it was 1-0, and he could have scored. So there were chances there. There were chances there for Leafs. They just couldn't get it done. But I would think about subtle. I wouldn't, make massive changes, Julie, but I'd make some subtle ones. I would make some subtle ones.
Right. This feels like a bit less. I mean, remember after Game 5 against Ottawa, that was just felt like a shellacking. But this one, even though it was only 2-0, It felt a little bit more obviously tilted in the favor of Florida. I wasn't really a fan of the USA chant at the end because it just showed also that the Florida fans don't really know that Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett are part of Team Canada. Anyway. But okay, just final one. I know I said final before, but final one to wrap things off.
Keep going.
How much pressure, and even not pressure, but how important is it for the Leafs to win Game 5?
This is a home ice series. It's really important when it's a home ice series that you win when you're on home ice. It's really important. You don't want to go back to Florida down 3-2, having lost 3 games in a row, and them trying to take advantage of you physically. So you've got to do a good job in Game 5. The start matters. Discipline matters. Puck management matters. Sacrificing yourself for the well-being of the team, whether that's shot blocking, whether it's being disciplined, whether it's being fearless and taking a hit to make a play. There's so many character issues that go into this game for Toronto that they have to illustrate if they're going to win it. I think they have more than enough character to illustrate it and to win it. And I think part of that is because of the way their coaching staff has prepared them over the course of 82 games to get to this point right now.
Right. We've seen a lot of their character come through in very high stress moments, and including high stress for me, as I promised my cousins at Christmas time this year that I would take them to a Leafs game. And I said Game 5. So now I'm going to spend all of the money I have in my bank account to take my cousins to the game, which, let me tell you, in Toronto is a lot. If it was a clinching situation, I think it would be more. So I guess I'm happy for that in that regard. But this is a funny quote I will end on, and not one that Leafs Nation will like, but one I heard on the Smartless podcast, which of course has Will Arnett, a Leafs fan, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes. And it was Bill Burr, who's a Bruins fan, who said, the first 3 games of a 7-game series, you do not want any part of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The last 4, though, nothing but smooth sailing. And it was a dagger, but it was coming from a Bruins fan. I thought that was pretty funny and something that we're seeing a little bit right now. But this is a different Leafs team, so we'll have to see if that 5th game is not smooth sailing for the Florida Panthers. As we thank Pierre McGuire for his insight and analysis here on McGuire Mondays. Toronto Sports Rush for Bet Rivers. We will see you guys again to tee up Game 5, and we'll see if the Leafs are able to keep things going.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.